Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do want to just acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from traditional Treaty 6 territory and land the Métis people share a very deep connection with. Just after midnight last night, the Fall Assembly session ended. As the leader of the official opposition, Rachel Notley, said yesterday, it's hard to recall a session that ended so abruptly, especially with so much important business on the agenda and before the House. The UCP bill to gamble away Albertans' pensions was debated for less than 8 hours. The bill to give UCP ministers bigger gifts was debated for just 4.5 hours. This was a session where the government used their majority in the legislature to put bigger Christmas presents under the tree for themselves while moving to ruin everyday Albertans' retirement security. It was a session where our NDP official opposition proposed measures to ensure that Albertans never pay to see a family doctor. Well, the UCP moved to dismantle public health care and lay off nurses in the middle of a crisis in our hospitals and clinics. It was a session where we brought forward legislation to better fund classrooms for students, our future leaders, to learn in, while the UCP moved to pad the executive salaries for their friends and insiders. And it was a session where we brought forward legislation to give renters an immediate break from the crushing cost of housing, while the UCP moved to increase the dollar value of the gifts that they receive from high-powered lobbyists and others looking to gain political favor. The UCP gravy train was running full blast while Albertans continue to struggle to make ends meet. It keeps going too. We exposed hefty sole source contracts to Danielle Smith's friends, one of which produced a report advocating for alternative medicine and ignoring science, and another who ignored the glaring impact of two communities in the north as a result of repeated incidents involving oil sands facilities contaminating the waterways and land used by many to fish and hunt. And while the legislature is supposed to belong to the people of Alberta and public accountability should be paramount, this government did everything they could to hide from Albertans while planning to gamble with their pensions. They refused to hold in-person town halls despite promises to do so. They instead produced a skewed survey that didn't ask the critical questions and a quote-unquote workbook that, well, I'm not sure what the point of that workbook was. They took Albertans' money and they spent it on a $7.5 million advertising campaign about the supposed benefits of leaving the CPP, and then later admitted the numbers in the ad are likely not true. That's called false advertising. Or better yet, it's called lying to the very voters who elected this government. The official opposition, the largest in Alberta's history, we did the opposite. We went out into communities and held our own town halls on pensions, standing room only. And we have many more to come, including events in our Dawson, Edmonton, and Calgary just over the next week. Many more planned for Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Drumheller, and elsewhere in the new year. We consulted widely on the legislation we introduced, both with important stakeholders, but also with everyday people who are struggling to get by. And just because the session has ended doesn't mean that our hard work is done. Far from it. We will continue fighting to care for the people of this incredible province and to move us forward on many important matters. When it comes to Albertans' retirement security, as the leader said last night, this isn't over. Albertans, your pensions belong to you. They're the reward earned over a lifetime of hard work, and we will stop at nothing to keep the UCP's hands off your CPP. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions about the end of the legislative session.
Thank you. Just a reminder, if you're on Zoom, it's the raise hand function. If you're on the phone, it's *9 to get into the question queue. And we'll just... Catherine, your line should be open.
Button wasn't popping.
Oh, Catherine,
Sorry.
Catherine, sorry, just letting you know, I'm just hearing your voice now. I might have missed the start of your comments.
No, the unmute button wasn't popping up for me, so.
Okay.
So you mentioned that it was less than 8 hours of debate on Bill 2, less than 4 on, I believe it was Bill, Justice Statutes Amendment Act.
That's right.
I mean, when the MEP, when you were in government, brought in time allocation on Bill 6, but it seems like this was time allocation on at least 3 bills, and it wasn't after some debate. It was basically kicking off third reading under time allocation.
That's right.
What says when is time allocation appropriate to be used, and how would you say it was used at this point?
So that's a really great question, and of course there will be different opinions, but I will say that to protect democracy, to respect who Albertans send to the legislature, time allocation should be used judiciously and only after ample opportunity has been given to all members of the Legislative Assembly to debate a piece of legislation. As you noted, time allocation was used as we moved into Committee of the Whole on 3 bills, across 3 bills, at both Committee of the Whole and at third reading. Leaving us with, in the case of Bill 2, the most important issue for Albertans, the thing everyone will be talking about at Christmas dinner this holiday season, the UCP's plan to gamble with their pensions. We only had 2 hours to introduce every amendment that we had on that particular bill. Now, the UCP government rejected every amendment, but I will also say we were only able to put up 1 or 2 members to speak to each amendment, to speak to something as important as making sure the referendum is binding, as making sure that benefits are protected, as making sure that a referendum question is a fair and accurate question given the issues of transparency we've seen with the survey that doesn't even ask, do you want to leave the CPP? I am worried about what a referendum question from this government might look like. So we did not have adequate time. I think that time allocation was used in a heavy-handed manner to shut down debate on issues that the government was uncomfortable continuing to talk about in the legislature. That includes the pensions issue. That includes a bill that was giving them the ability to accept bigger gifts, truly something none of my caucus has ever heard a concern about from our constituents, and a bill to return to a system that allows a giant out-of-whack salaries for agencies, boards, and commissions, something that the current government, when they were in opposition, railed against, back to kind of PC entitlement days. So it's very frustrating as an official opposition, as the largest official opposition in Alberta's history, to have less time than ever to debate issues that are of critical importance to Albertans.
Do you have a follow-up, Catherine?
Yeah, and obviously between House leaders there is some negotiation. I'm thinking there was a motion that would have allowed evening sittings all week long, but last night was the only one. Was there any reason to not extend the amount of time allowed for debate on these bills?
That's a great question. And so the government could have had given us more time for debate. The government House Leader is the one who can move that motion to have evening sittings. I can tell you, with a 38-member strong official opposition caucus, we were ready, able and willing to debate these pieces of legislation. The Leader of the Official Opposition, Rachel Notley, said clearly, we will be here till Christmas. Unfortunately, time allocation was put in place. We weren't able to do that. A single hour in third reading on bills 2, 5, and 8. Very, very frustrating given the volume of correspondence we've received on those 3 bills.
Our next caller, your line is open. Please state your name and outlet.
Hi, it's Lisa from the Journal. I'm wondering, this session was a lot louder than previous sessions, perhaps by virtue of the fact that there are more opposition NDPs, or maybe that was a factor in it. We heard a lot of heckling and back and forth. I wonder if you can describe the tone and tenor of this fall sitting from your perspective.
So certainly, I think we saw in the legislature a great deal of passion, a great deal of emotion, because a lot of the bills that were being discussed, a lot of the things we were talking about, are of huge importance to Albertans. As an MLA, we get the correspondence from everyday Albertans who are worried about cost of living, who are worried about their health care, or are worried about their pension and what this government is doing. And a lot of that does come into the chamber as we're debating these issues back and forth. We also had 19 new members in the official opposition, I think 11 new members in the government caucus. So a lot of new MLAs finding their feet, finding their voice, and engaging in the debate in the chamber. We always see the tone and temperature of the Legislative Assembly kind of creep up the closer we get to the end of session, and we certainly saw that here. But I think we also had a lot of really good questions asked in question period, some amazing maiden speeches from the brand new MLAs, and some important bill debates that got cut off too soon by the government imposing time allocation.
Do you have a follow-up, Lisa?
Yeah, thanks for that. I wanted to ask also about this point of privilege that alleged that the House Leader made comments in the legislature saying control her, deal with her, or I will deal with her in reference to an NDP MLA. Were you there for that, Christina? Did you hear that? What exactly happened there?
Thank you for asking. Yes, so as I was just speaking about, the tone, the temperature escalates towards the end of session. Last night, the very last sitting night after time allocation had been imposed, certainly temperatures were quite high. There was heckling going back and forth. The legislature was getting loud, but things did cross the line when the government House Leader, while speaking to me about the member for Edmonton Whitemud, said control her and said deal with her or I will deal with her, which is incredibly threatening language. And the member from Edmonton Whitemud felt threatened by the language that was in use. And so we treat that very, very seriously. There have been points of privilege in the past called by the government caucus when an opposition member has pointed, or called by the government caucus because of language that was deemed to be threatening. And under those same grounds, we raised a point of privilege. I was able to make some of my initial arguments. You won't find this exchange in Hansard. It wasn't the main speaker at the time. This was kind of the background heckling. And so I've asked the speaker if we would be able to review the audio in some way, which he mentioned in his response last night is unprecedented. So we'll see if we will get that opportunity to get on the record what happened during that exchange. And the opportunity for the government to respond to the point of privilege will come at the next sitting day, likely in February.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller. Michelle, your line should be open.
Oh, hi, Christina. It's Michelle Belfontaine from CBC. Following up on what you just said, so you've got the audio feed that we all see and listen to. But is there a way within the legislature room that there's different microphones that record? Like, is there, because when you say you want to review the audio, is it possible to review the audio perhaps? I'm not really sure about the setup. You probably have a better idea than I do.
So I can only speak to my sense of things, and to find out exactly how it's set up, I think you'd have to direct your question to the speaker. But the speaker has said on multiple occasions when there's been a point of order around a heckle that he did not hear, that he has the ability to go back and to listen to the audio coming from mics from individual desks. This is not something that the speaker has typically done, maybe has never done to our knowledge. And because it is a very serious point of privilege dealing with a member feeling threatened, I've asked him if we would be able to do that in this case. I'll have to leave it to the speaker to determine if he's technically able to do that and also then willing to do that in this case because of a point of privilege, because it hasn't been done that way before. But my understanding is that he has access to audio from all the desks during times of debate. But the practice is that that is not something he would normally listen to or go to. So I've made a special request, and we'll have to see what happens with that.
Do you have a follow-up, Michelle?
Yeah, I do. And Matt, I'm wondering though, Christina, I mean, there's been complaints about bad behavior for a while with the, even with the last 4 years previous to this year's election, and also, complaints about time allocation. So, I mean, people think that perhaps the reason that the government does that, they can get away with it because the public generally doesn't care, right? I mean, they're not watching at night. It's not an issue that really moves the dial. So how do you make people care about this?
That's a very interesting question, because I think people rightly care right now about affording food on the table and maybe getting their kids into some sports, dealing with whatever rent increase they might have, dealing with the government's attack on pensions, and then knowing that this government that they don't trust on healthcare is going to do a healthcare system redesign. So Albertans have a lot on their plate right now with this government. And so when it comes to the procedures in the legislature, as the official opposition House Leader, as the official opposition caucus, we're always going to be working to make that chamber work the best way we possibly can. But certainly I can understand Albertans being focused on how expensive this UCP government has made everything. And I can certainly understand that the minutiae of the legislature is not as compelling when you've got real issues, making sure you're putting food on the table.
Thanks, Michelle. We'll go to our next caller. Dean, your line should be open.
Thanks. Hi, Christina. So they voted down your amendments. However, the finance minister told the House, don't worry, we'll respect the results of any referendum. And all investment income from the Alberta plan to start with and ongoing will be put back in the plan. To those, he's assured the public that that's what will happen. Should that be enough?
So the party that in the election assured Albertans we didn't need to debate pensions because they didn't have any plans to gamble with Albertans' pensions, but now they're doing that, is now asking Albertans to trust them that they're going to do it well. It's ridiculous, Dean. It defies all logic that this government continues to lie to Albertans, first during the election, now telling them that Bill 2 requires a referendum, and leaving loophole after loophole after loophole in the bill so that they can continue to do what they want when they want to do it. There are a number of concerns with Bill 2, but one of the big issues for me personally is that I do not trust this government to give nonpartisan, good, validated data to Albertans on which to make any decision, and I don't trust them to ask a good question, and that's really, really important. We did try to fix that with 2 amendments that they rejected. So this government is absolutely committed to their agenda to gamble with Albertans' pensions. They didn't want to be held accountable for even the things they say through legislation. And that does not build trust with the Alberta public. I think this is what Alberta families are going to be talking about at Christmas holiday gatherings all across the province.
Do you have a follow-up there, Dean? I think you're muted, Dean, but...
We're all having trouble with mute today. Sorry, so I just want to drill down a bit on the finance minister's comments in the House last night. So when the bill was introduced, he told Jesperson, we're not going to pursue the Quebec model. And then they rolled back on that in multiple statements from his office.
Yep.
And then last night, he said, I've been clear, assets transferred from CPP to an Alberta pension plan and future contributions of employers' employees would solely be used to set up and operate a provincial pension plan. So now it sounds like we're back to no Quebec model. What is happening here?
So the finance minister has lied. He has not been clear. This has been anything but clear. We've had statements, counter-statements, we've had promises, broken promises. Now we have a bill that actually does not, in black and white, do what the government says it will do. We tried amendment after amendment to, again, only have the government do what they said they would do. Have a binding referendum, have a clear question, make sure that Benefits are protected not just for current participants, but future. Make sure that there's Auditor General review of some of the spending that happens around these things. Make sure that not only will the current contributions, but future contributions will be used only for pension purposes. All of these things are things that the minister will say, but he won't put into legislation. I do not trust this minister. I do not trust the UCP with the CPP. Neither do Albertans. And they passed bad legislation that's going to let them do whatever they want. And I think that the Alberta public does not agree with this government's agenda.
Thank you, Dean. We'll go to our next caller. Janet, your line should be open.
Hi there, sorry about the background noise. First question is about Bill 2. Okay. How many NDP MLA members did not get any chance to speak to Bill 2 or any of the amendments?
Oh, that's a great question. So as the official opposition House Leader, knowing that time allocation had been imposed at Committee of the Whole, we were short on time, I made the decision to make sure as much as I could that every member in my caucus had at least a couple of minutes to talk to Bill 2, the most important priority for Albertans. So allow me to follow up with you, but I believe by the time we finished last night, every member had at least a minute or two to talk to Bill 2. Now, that is not the same thing as every member having had the opportunity to really engage in the debate. They were able to just get up and say really high level what they're hearing most from their constituents, not give a planned 15-minute response that outlines all of their concerns. So we're talking about two very different things. And that was part of my strategy across the last 2 days, was trying to make sure under very difficult circumstances, under time allocation, that every member had at least a few minutes to register their constituents' concerns. We have 38 opposition MLAs. Each one of them deserved a real opportunity to share what they're hearing from their constituents, what they're hearing at the standing room only telephone town halls. I had the chance to be in St. Albert and in Red Deer, listening to not just pension experts, but seniors who are worried about the income that they rely on. And I really believe we did not get the opportunity to fully convey those concerns in the House, and certainly not every NDP MLA got that opportunity.
Do you have a follow-up, Janet?
I do, just back to the point of privilege. I'm wondering what you think of Speaker Cooper's decision to defer any debate or action on that until, I guess, what would be the spring setting or possibly budget time.
Yes, so we do often see that when it comes to a matter of privilege, to give all parties an opportunity to review the facts and to make arguments. In this case, I also made the request that we would review either audio or some form of transcript, if possible, about what occurred in the chamber so that we could have a common set of facts. And so he's allowing time, I hope, to be able to gather that. So I was not surprised that the arguments and the decision will be deferred into the future. It was very important to me, to the official opposition caucus, that we register this serious concern and this point of privilege last night. The Standing Order 15 does talk about it needing to be raised as soon as possible within the legislature, and so that's what we did.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller, Matthew. Thank you for your patience. Your line should be open.
No problem. I was just looking for some reaction to the federal oil and gas emissions cap announced today.
Oh, thank you very much for the question. Unfortunately, I have to be really honest. The last 2 days have been really busy for the official opposition House Leader, and we had a very late night sitting last night, and I have not had the opportunity to either review or be briefed. But we would be happy to make our energy critic available for comments on that, likely later today. But I'm unfortunately, I can't speak to that because my head has been in the chamber for the last 48 hours.
Do you have a follow-up, Matthew?
No, that's understandable. Don't worry about it. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's great. We'll do one quick pass for questions. Just a reminder, if you're on Zoom, it's the raise hand function. If you're on the phone, it's *9. I think Catherine might have one more question.
Yeah, just on reviewing the audio, since it hasn't really been done, I'm wondering it set any sort of precedence when you're talking about going back? Because as you mentioned, the speaker generally says, well, if I didn't hear it and Hansard didn't pick it up, then I can't rule on it. I mean, there's chirping. Chirping is kind of part of the experience in the House. Are you worried that it might set a precedent?
So thank you very much for the question, and I know you've been in the chamber and heard some of the chirping at times. Yes, potentially this could set a precedent. Now, we've asked for this on a point of privilege, which is a much more serious nature than a simple point of order. And I thought that it does make sense in this case, given the serious nature of the accusation and the debate that's happening and the threat that was uttered, that we have the opportunity to review the record in this case. One of the principles in the legislature and in the rules of our assembly is that in the absence of other evidence, members are to be believed when they say, this is my truth, or this is what I believe. And I think that's going to continue. I think the point of order system is likely to continue. But I have asked for something that hasn't been done before, so we'll have to watch to see if the Speaker is able to, if the Speaker chooses to share that information with both caucuses, and how that gets used in this case.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. We'll just do a quick check. I don't think there's any more questions on the line. Oh, Michelle Bellefontaine has thrown her hand up. Okay. One more quick question, Michelle.
Yeah, sorry, I did have my hand raised, but somehow it lowered on me. So I just wanted to ask about sort of the point about representation in the legislature. It's sort of a very basic democratic principle. And, you know, oh, excuse me, sorry about that. That, you know, in the legislature, Edmonton, for example, is represented by NDP MLAs, the entire city. And there's a good number of MLAs, NDP MLAs that represent Calgary. So I'm wondering if you can even speak about the idea that, you know, by limiting debate, that you're actually squelching the voice of people who elected your MLAs.
Thank you for that question. Yes. By limiting debate, you are stifling the voices of the constituents that those MLAs represent. And as noted, our official opposition caucus represents all of Edmonton, most of Calgary, and we are talking about hundreds of thousands of Albertans and our constituents whose voices deserve to be heard in the Alberta legislature. We do that by sharing concerns through bill debate, asking questions in question period, introducing member statements, tabling the letters that we get as MLAs. And each of the 38 members of the official opposition caucus is working every day to connect with constituents and to represent them in the Alberta legislature when time allocation is used, especially on bills that have only had 4 hours of debate. We have 38 members. There was a bill that we deem to be very important that only had 4 hours of debate. That essentially means that constituents, their voices, it's harder for them to be heard as well. So for Albertans who feel like this government is not listening, I would encourage them to write to their MLAs, write to the government, copy the official opposition critic when you can, and if an Albertan is concerned about their pension, they can sign our petition at albertasfuture.ca, because even though the House is no longer sitting and active bill debate is not happening, our job does not end. Because we also do work outside of the legislature to connect with constituents, to make sure that we are reflecting what we're hearing. And we're going to be doing that at those in-person town halls. Much better than telephone town halls. In-person town halls, we've got one in Ardrossan on Saturday, one in Edmonton on Monday, and one in Calgary on Thursday, because we take our job very, very seriously about making sure that we are talking to Albertans and then being able to reflect that back in the debate in the legislature, or even through press conferences and talking actively to the government to try and get them back on the right track.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. That concludes our press conference for today.
Thank you, everyone.